Welcome to Beyond Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Petrellis, and we are really excited for today's episode. And before we get into our coach, I just want to give a special shout out to Boston Physical Therapy and Wellness and our sponsor, Dave Kern. We shot a commercial with him yesterday, really got to get to know him a little bit more and just the things that he does for, the local cities and towns that he works in, but also the sports teams across the state. I mean, he's a great resource for high schools and colleges to be taking a look at for rehabilitating injuries and being there to give evaluations for players that do get injured. So it was great to get to know him. Had a lot of fun cutting the commercial yesterday, and we really look forward to our relationship going forward with him. But now on to and continuing our Women in Sports Month for the month of May. We're really excited to get this guest on. To me, one of the top girls basketball coaches in the state of Massachusetts, and I have the statistics to back it up here, but also just like a good person, runs a consistent program, is an educator, somebody who I really think as a parent, you would want coaching your kid, especially at the high school level, where a lot of things, as they get older and they get smarter and they develop the game, you want someone who's a balance of being a really good coach and being a really good mentor. And that's what we have here today. The head girls basketball coach at Rockland High School has made the playoffs in all 8 years as being head coach at the high school. And that's a really difficult task to do in itself. A cumulative record of 133 wins, 47 losses, was the 2020 D3 Mass Basketball Coaches Association Coach of the Year, and a 3-time South Shore League Coach of the Year as well. So pretty awesome coach we have on. I'm really excited to have a great conversation today. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Diana Mitchell Newcomb.
Thanks for having me, Anthony.
Yeah, we're really excited. It was fun to talk to you on the phone the other day and get to know you a little bit more. And, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Now, I love to do this for coaches. I did this last few weeks, actually. I love to give street cred to some of my coaches here as a player. So when I started doing a little bit of homework on you, I found that in 2000, you were the point guard for Rockland High School, the state championship team. So you understand what it is to be a player in Rockland, but also kind of get your team to that level to compete, in that last game of the season, as you would say, right? But you also played at Merrimack, and you guys at one point were a number 2 team in the nation with you playing there as your senior year. So again, someone who really understands the game of basketball, but also played it really well. And coaches deserve the street cred when they can get it, so I want to give it to you.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. And thanks for going back and digging those things up from the archives that have been dug in there. But yeah, I mean, my experiences playing have everything to do with how I am as a coach. So I know I wouldn't be here if I didn't, get put through the ringer as a player. So
Yeah. And I mean, so just continuing on that a little bit, I mean, talk about your love and passion for the game of basketball. I mean, obviously you played it in high school, but you played at the next level in college. I mean, when did you say to yourself, like when you got to the end of college, were you like, coaching's what I want to do? I mean, what really got you into the game of coaching?
I mean, being a point guard, you kind of just have a little bit more of a natural knack of doing more of the, being a coach and a leader on the floor. But I can't say that right after I graduated, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I actually stepped away for a year and moved to California with one of my teammates and then one of the players from St. A's, and just took a step back and kind of figured out what I wanted to do. And I immediately came right back and got into teaching and called my athletic director and said, I'm here. Like, I want to get in, like anything I can do.
Yeah, and so when we were talking, the cool thing is that when you first kind of got back into it, you coach under Brian Fisher. You volunteered at Hanover High School for Brian Fisher, who was a guest earlier this year on the show. So the one thing I love about basketball is like the coaches are so connected. Every basketball coach I've had on, whether it's the girls or the boys game, everyone knows each other. And it's not like I knew that going into it. So it's crazy the world that the high school basketball has.
Yeah, and Brian's father was actually my athletic director all through high school, the great Bob Fisher.
Yeah.
So, I've known him since I've been, 10 years old, and it was Mr. Fisher and Coach Fisher. And, so I always had that. When I played, Brian actually, the end of my high school career, he actually scouted some of our big tournament games and everything. So we had a long relationship before that point.
Yeah, it's really cool. This is probably like the fifth or sixth episode that I've done that there's like one coach that I've had on that's connected to another coach that was previously on it. So when
Yeah.
you said that, that was really fun. I love that. I think that's awesome. So you coach, obviously you eventually got back into Hanover High School and you were, coaching there as an assistant. And then obviously you became the head coach, fairly quickly after becoming an assistant. But then when I did my homework, I noticed that and this is for all these coaches out there because I went through the same exact thing. I had an 0-6 start in my career, so I know how it feels a little bit. But
Yeah.
you started out 0-5, and being a new coach on the scene, and obviously trying to put things in the way that you want and change things the way that you want. You started off kind of rough, but you ended up finishing the season 11-4, making the playoffs after going 0-5, which I found extremely impressive. So my question to you is, just talk about for coaches out there, having a rough start to your season and not letting it be like, okay, we're done. We're not that good of a team. And on the flip side, how'd you get the team to kind of start flip playing and playing really well after that?
I mean, I couldn't ever in my worst nightmare imagine starting 0-5. First of all, I'd never in my life lost 5 games in a row, never mind usually never even 5 games in a season as a player. So I like took a step back and I questioned myself, like, is this really for me? And it just so happened that after our fifth loss, thankfully we were going into Christmas vacation and we had no tournament, so all we had was practice time. And I said, great, I have like 10 straight practices. And you kind of go in and you want to give, when you're a new coach, you kind of want to give some of the upperclassmen a chance. And okay, you don't want to go in and ruffle any feathers. You want to, play nice and have it. But obviously that everyone gets judged by their wins and losses. So you have to make adjustments. So I just said, I'm going to make some adjustments here. And I changed our starting lineup, put in some underclassmen, people that I kind of thought would give us more of a chance to win. And it kind of just changed from there, and I can't say every player was completely happy, with it, but I think that they were happy with the end result. And that's really what mattered. Like, you don't go back and say, as a player, how many wins that you won. You go back and you look at your experiences and did we have fun and this and that. And I think that they actually started to enjoy themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, is kind of taking that step back, and maybe not having that Christmas tournament was the best thing that ever happened
Oh,
to you,
absolutely.
because you probably were able to learn a lot about your team and kind of figured some things out that maybe you overlooked being a first year coach and taking on a million other responsibilities that come with the job that you probably didn't even realize until you became
Oh,
head coach.
oh yeah. When you're a head coach, you're not just, there for your practice time. You are running the program. You are making sure that all the practice schedules are set, JV's all set, freshmen's all set, that you're watching their games, that, you're dealing with those coaches and, any issues that that players on those teams might have. So it's not even just focusing on your X's and O's and running your practice. It's, something that was completely new to me. And, um, you kind of just have to fall into that role.
Yeah, and well, whatever you did work, because you end up going on a 7-game winning streak during that 11-4 run. So you obviously were playing some good basketball at the most important part of the season, right? I mean, the end of the season going into playoffs, if you're playing hot, you're a team that's kind of scary. It doesn't matter what your seed is, you're playing well, and who knows? You end up winning a few games or making it a little bit further than maybe you realize that you could. But whatever you did worked, and that kind of is going to transition to me to my next question or thought is, what is your coaching style? I mean, talk about, if I walked into a gymnasium when your practice started, what am I seeing?
Well, you're seeing a pretty high intense practice. We kind of have a routine of how we start our practice. We start, getting warmed up together with some basic shooting drills. We always start with some fundamentals, shooting drills, ball handling, and that goes for your point guards to your shooters to your post. Everyone does everything the same. Um, Always at the beginning for our fundamental stuff. So we go in from that, and then we start to get into our transition drills. Um, I think the game of basketball is so fun to watch when it's up and down. So that's our philosophy, is we want to get the ball up. Okay. We want to score in transition. We want to get as many easy baskets as we can. So that's always like our primary focus at the very beginning. And I switch up. I have numerous drills that we do to do that, to make sure that we can see, any type of fast break that you can see, not just your, over the top layup, because that, you might get 2 of those a game, but how you can score different ways in transition. And then we'll go into, our offensive concepts, our defensive concepts. And, I throw in some, free throws here and there. I'll say, everyone get to a basket. You got to make 2 in a row, go. So it's not just, it's kind of set, go there, shoot while you're tired. So those always get thrown in during practices, but the kids kind of know what to expect, because, and then obviously as the season goes on, you add in your scouting and different breakdowns and stuff. But you'll never walk into a practice and see kids sitting down or not engaged or just off to the side watching what the starters are doing. That doesn't happen. We always will have multiple baskets going, and I have great assistant coaches that, are always there to work with kids if we're doing different type of breakdowns.
Yeah, it's awesome. And that's it. Like in the game of football, when I coach, like the one thing was always, I wanted practice to be upbeat, and it was constantly moving. I mean, everything was timed. We had sirens, we had timers on. We played music when we could, unless the neighborhood complained, right? But,
Yeah.
we really felt like it was important to have this upbeat practice that was constantly transitioning and changing, because I'm sure like the game of basketball, like the game of football changes a lot throughout. Plays happen, things happen, unexpected things happen, and you got to be ready to jump from one thing to the other when it does, and be prepared for that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I want to make sure, I'm going to look at my notes to make sure that I'm reading this right. So I'm just going to kind of look off to the side here. So you've been coaching 8 years. Now you typically play like 20 games in a season. So that's 160 regular season games. In 160 regular season games, there's only been 4 games that you've ever lost by double digits. That means you're either losing really tight games, winning really tight games, or blowing somebody out of the water. But your team is a consistent, tough product year after year. And this is probably the most mesmerizing stat of all the stats. And there's a lot of unbelievable stats that you have. But talk about just maybe the culture and the mental toughness that your basketball program has in order to be in games like that, day after day, week after week, year after year, and being a very tough team to play.
Yeah. And, I think that's something probably that the girls might not even realize, but I know that we're going to be in just about every single game that we play. And it has to do with how they practice. I think that, the result of our practice translate into, no game is going to be 10 times more competitive than our practice is going to be. So I can't even say that we don't always practice situations every single day, because we will do situational things, general situation stuff, but you kind of never know what the situation is going to be. So they just understand that time and score. We always talk about time and score, not letting teams go on a run, and how we can create our own runs. I always say we got to make the other team, we score first, and we get into our press. So that's our big thing. And we make the other team call the first timeout. Now all the other coaches I play against, now they're never going to call it. But, it's just like little things like that we talk about. And I know that can have an effect on the game. The last minute of a quarter and the first 3 minutes of the next quarter, I think can really tell how games are going to be. So there's little spurts in games that I know that we have to win, and I know that sometimes when I'm resting some of my big scores, we just got to stay in that time, so I kind of play each quarter, in 2 or 3 minute segments in my own head.
And that's great. Well, just jumping back. I mean, I think you should, your first game now, just call a timeout like 2 minutes in and just really throw the coach off. Right?
Yeah. I don't use my timeouts very often. So,
but I find that great, because I really think that that's like a mentality. Like everything you just said is a mentality. You're going to be the first to call a timeout. We're going to be the first to do this. Like everything is a mentality. And I think that when you have a mentality like that, your mental toughness is automatically just better than your opponent, because you're expecting things, you know what you need to do. And obviously, as we're going to talk more and more about you, your program has been consistent. And that's the word I'm going to keep coming back to a lot in this podcast, is consistent. And that stat, unfortunately, isn't always, up at the top when it comes to winning and losing. And I think it should be looked at more of how consistent and tough teams can really be, and their leader who kind of leads them in that direction. So again, consistency. Just talk about constructing a roster. I mean, you average about 17 wins a year when I did the math out. So that means you're a pretty competitive product every year. 1 through 8 is what it seemed when I talked to basketball coaches, you kind of usually have figured out. But then 9 through 12, I've heard 9 through 16. I mean, some people carry more than others. So how do you go about constructing your roster into having the best, depth you can possibly have across the board?
Yeah, I usually like to carry around 12. Once I've carried 13. This year I had 10. We're not a very big school, and unfortunately, we're being bumped down a little bit. I will take between 10 and 12 players. I will take the best 10 and 12 that I think will have a chance to work the best together. So there might be someone on JV that's maybe more skilled than maybe my 10th or 11th player, but maybe they're not the right fit for the team type thing. And maybe they need another year to get used to that, and it varies from year to year. But they know that, if you're going to play for me, you're going to be committed. You're going to be hardworking. You're going to put in the time, and the best part is that I'm a middle school phys ed teacher, so I get to know these kids since 5th grade. So I know them before that they even get to the high school. I've seen them in class for 4 years. I develop a relationship with them, and they've developed a relationship with me. They know what they're going to get from me. So it's the kinks kind of work themselves out. I always want to have a roster that, one, if you have talent, you always have a chance. But that doesn't happen every year. Every small town goes through their drought. So I try to give them confidence, and I try to build just relationships with them. And I can't say that we always we have hard workers every single year. Some of the hardest working kids around. This year, in my first year, is the first time that one of our players got offered a scholarship Division II. We've never had another. We've had plenty of girls go Division III, which is amazing, but we've never had a scholarship player up until a junior this year has been offered by a couple Division II schools. So I'm not playing around with rosters of D1 and full of D1 and D2 kids. I've never had one before, so it's like we get those hardworking kids. They buy into what I say, and I listen to them. I know, it's not just a one-way relationship. It's, let's talk this out. What works for you. Let's see how that we can do it together.
And I like that communicative piece, right? I mean, there's no way what you coach or how you coached 8 years ago is the way that you coach your team now.
Oh yeah.
And not just from a skill level, but also probably just in the way of dealing with players and, how to deal with situations. Maybe you dealt with them a few years back a little bit differently than you deal with them now. So you develop and evolve as a coach too. And again, all the things that you said, like it's all the above, check. Like, I love it. And then constructing that roster and understanding what you have from year to year and picking those best players. I know obviously you have your league games and, you play the same teams and they get to know you and obviously they know your style a little bit, but how do you go about constructing your non-league schedule? I mean, as I mentioned before, 17 wins a season out of 20 games typically in the regular season. So, you're winning in league, but you're also picking opponents outside the league that you seem to be winning with well. What is the thought process that goes into picking your non-league opponents?
Well, we usually have, we've been hosting our own Christmas tournament every year, which has been very competitive. We've had Wellesley in it for many years, Hingham, Hanover, Stoughton. We like that tournament to be a mix up of non-league teams so that we can have, see different opponents in there. And then we play in an end of the year tournament over at Abington with Whitman Hanson, Abington, and whoever else is in that. And then we generally play, my old AAU coach, who's Bob Sullivan from Duxbury, so I played him every single year. One of my friends, she played at St. A's, is the coach over at Situate, so we play each other. We try to schedule each other every single year. We've been playing Pembroke, we play Hanover. We try to go to that D2 schedule and play most of the teams in the Patriot League and develop, great competitive games with them, obviously. So, it's building. And we've gone way past that. We've gone into the St. Mary's tournament. We've played Arlington Catholic. Sometimes we can't find games. It's our non-league schedule is always with winning teams. I'm sorry.
There it is. There it is.
I knew he was coming at some point. I knew it.
That's her cat. For those that aren't watching this is her cat. It's been walking by the screen a little bit, and it's awesome. We love it. When animals, pets, they're all welcome here. So
yeah.
So and that probably gets you ready for, when you start playing D3 tournament. I mean, you're playing some of these teams that are maybe better than anything you're going to see in your tournament or just as good. So preparing yourself and kind of, sprinkling that into your schedule, I think also gets your girls maybe playing playoff basketball a lot earlier in the season, knowing that they're playing some tougher teams. So in your 2020 season, we're going to talk a little bit about your 2020 season, but the first thing that I want to bring up, because this is what I find fascinating about coaching, and this is something that a lot of people probably have never asked you. So I'm hoping that maybe I am one of the first people, if not maybe the first person to really ask you this. But in the 2020 season, you had a pretty good squad coming back, and you knew that you had a pretty good squad. But you had a person returning, an all-scholastic, Marin Monette, who tore her ACL in like your second scrimmage, just like a simple layup. Now you knew you had a team coming back. Obviously she's one of the better players on your team. Talk about how you were able to navigate your team through such a tough loss. I mean, all scholastics and all scholastic. I know, us talking and looking it up, that she was one heck of a 3-point shooter too. So, obviously you lose a big element of your team. How has you as a coach maybe emotionally dealt with it with the team, but also how you were able to kind of say, okay, on to the next, here we go?
Yeah, it was pretty devastating. Anyone that ever witnesses, a teammate or a player or someone gets injured, it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
So it was the first time that I actually witnessed something right in front of me, and I knew it as soon as she went down. And when I say tears just came down my eyes, like, she's a senior, she's going off next year, she's going to be playing soccer and basketball at Plymouth State. It just, everything flashed through my head. Like, okay, like, is she going to be okay? Is she going to be able to rebound from this? Are we going to be, is the team going to put their head down? Like, where is this going to go? As a coach, I'd never dealt with losing a player to an injury before. So it was something brand new for me. I was devastated. I can't even tell you what happened for the rest of that scrimmage because my head was just gone. And then, the days, that was our second scrimmage. We were opening up in 3 days. This was our team, I knew who our starters were. I knew what kind of my bench rotation was at that time. And now it's like, okay, now you got to go back and you got to relook. Who's going to be next man up? And what I put a freshman in there. So every single year that I've actually coached now, I've started a freshman. Last year was going to be the first year that I never did until that injury happened. And I put in a very smart player that I knew. Was she the most talented? No. And I would tell her, we had that conversation, but she knew how to play with those older and experienced girls. She could figure out what her role is. She was so smart, and I knew that she would be the best fit to be able to get those starting minutes. And she did her job.
I mean, so I heard you say that you start a freshman every year. Is that purposeful? Is that systematic? Or is that just happened to be coincidence every year?
It's just happened every single year. And every year I go in, I'm like, I don't have a freshman next year. And then it comes to that point and it's like, yep, yes, I do.
It's crazy. And they have to have some skill level. I mean, I coached football at Arlington Catholic for 15 years as a coordinator and as a head coach. And I've probably only seen 4 kids that we've ever started that were freshmen. and they were good. I mean, they were tough. And so when I hear that and I think, wow, I mean, you must have a heck of a youth program that comes through, or a youth program that's run pretty well in order to have girls come in like varsity ready to go.
Yeah, we have a great youth program, and I think Rockland does an awesome job with it. I have complete trust in what those coaches do for those kids, and then a lot of them, they play in the AAU system too. So it's not just they're just coming from 8th grade travel up to the high school. They play at a pretty competitive high level throughout the year. So I think with very good coaching, so I think that always comes into play.
It's awesome. It's great. It's great to have a feeder system,
And when you start a freshman, you have to know that you're starting a freshman, and you have to live with those freshmen up and down. I sometimes they have more of a leeway with me, because I say if I pull them, there they go. So sometimes you have to let them play through their mistakes more and figure it out. So.
And I'm glad you said that, because you got to look at the short term and say there's going to be those mistakes, but in the long term of developing a leader in my program now as a sophomore or junior and as a senior, and you have that. So every year, if you're starting a new freshman, by the time you get to that 4th or 5th year, you might actually have a roster full of girls that were those freshmen,
Right.
So
yeah.
that's
And this year, Julia Eli, who's been the first girl that's been offered a scholarship, her freshman year, she tripped over her own feet two times in her first varsity game. And she knows, we talk about it all the time. Like, look at where you've come from that first game. Like, we go back and we watch it and we're like, oh man. But now it's just to see that, that progress is just crazy.
There's always those funny moments on film when you just see stuff, and like I still laugh about things from like 5 years ago that I'll go on and sneak on and watch and just laugh,
Yeah.
So this next part, I'm gonna call it slaying the dragon, okay? And I'm gonna explain to the audience why I mean that. So I'm gonna be looking off of my notes here because I want to make sure I'm as accurate as possible. You guys defeated in 2020 Archbishop Williams. And Archbishop Williams girls basketball is one of the most dominant basketball programs in the state of Massachusetts. They were South sectional champions 7 years in a row before you guys finally knocked them off. And you knocked them off pretty handily. I thought I saw it was something like 53-37, and maybe the score wasn't indicative of the game, and I know that happens a lot. But talk about that. I mean, what was the feeling that you got? I mean, going into a season, do you say to yourself, okay, we're pretty good for the South Shore League. Are we good enough to beat Archbishop Williams? Does that go through your head year after year when you know that you're eventually going to have to play that team in a deep run?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the South Shore League is always, very competitive. We always have, in the top, 5 or 6 seeds in Division III is always at least 2 to 3 teams from the South Shore League, whether it's always usually Norwell. EB has always been up there. Abington's always been up there. Middleborough has been up there the last couple of years. So it's like, we do spend a lot of time concentrating on the South Shore League, but then you always look, where is Archie's when those brackets come out, and it's not just us. It is every team that ever has played in Division III South always says, I don't want to be on the same side as Archie's. And that's a huge, thing to their program, that, the consistency that they have been able to win with, and the way that they've been able to win, and, absolute props to them. But I'm glad that their run ended with us.
Yeah. So, I mean, talk about that game a little bit. When you go into a game playing a team like that, now you knew you had a squad. And you lost one of your better players, but you still played extremely well that season and still played up to, to the hype, I would say. But playing a team like that going into, I mean, how important is it to have a first quarter that's real solid? I mean, coming out and either jumping out to a big lead or playing good defense or just playing even with someone like that in the first quarter.
Yeah, we were pretty locked in. We were locked in. The cat's back.
Hey, listen, part 2. I love it.
Yeah. We were pretty locked in on those for like our last 12 games of the season. We were 18-2, and we lost our second game and our 4th game. And then after that, we just went on we just said, okay, we're gonna tighten up our defense, everything. And we just went on a absolute tear to finish the regular season. And then it's like, okay, now we put it into another gear going into the playoffs. And I think there was three to four quarters before that Archie's game where we didn't give up a single point in a quarter, and it was like, okay, we know we can do it. Obviously these teams that we're playing aren't Archies. They don't have that talent that Archie has, and they haven't necessarily won the big games like Archie has. So once it came down to that game, it's okay. We're going to do the same thing, but better. And we studied them, and we watched film, and we concentrated on, not just them, but things that we knew that we had to do, mostly defensively. And I said, if we can get stops, we have a chance to be in the game. And when that end of that quarter happened, and it was 10-0, I first of all, a 10-point lead against them, I never thought was safe.
Right.
But to have a 10-point cushion, I thought, okay, now we have a little bit. If we make a turnover here or there, it's not a 1-possession game right now. And I wanted to try to keep it at least a 5-possession game from there on out. I thought if it got closer than that, they had the experience, they had the firepower, they had all of that we could lose it. But we kept our lead, and we never let them have that big run.
Well, what I want to know is, what was your speech at halftime? Because the girls came out and they balled out in the third quarter, and you guys opened up to a pretty big lead. So, I mean, you don't have to share everything, but going into that, you obviously had a tremendous first quarter. You went in, I think, with a 9-point lead in the half. And then you came out, and you guys, I think, were up by like as much as 16, 17 points at some points out the third quarter, coming out in the second half. So what was that halftime like in that locker room with that team?
I can't say I was present for the whole time. I was actually extremely sick. That whole day I was throwing up and other stuff the whole day. I didn't even get to take the bus to the game. My middle school principal had to drive me to the game. I was that sick. And then adrenaline takes over. I had to have my own separate bathroom when we were there in case I had to run off. So I can't even say I remember, my parents came in, and my mom brought me Gatorades and ginger ales and everything. And I just had them all set up right next to the scoreboard. So I just went in and said, hey, it's 0-0, or hey, we're down 10 right now. So we can't settle, we can't go in, and we can't think we have a lead. And those girls, they were so mentally locked in that they knew it. Like, I didn't even have to say it. Like, they knew exactly what had to be done. They were, so advanced in their basketball knowledge, this group, and they had played together for so long, and we had tremendous leaders. And, I could have walked in and said something, or I could have walked in and know that the same thing were being said by my captains. We were all on the same page. So that's, one of the greatest things about that group is just the connectivity, that they were all extensions of me on the court. They needed a little reassurance and everything, but but you would have never known that they had a lead looking in that locker room. They were there, focused, like, okay, 16 more minutes, not like, oh, we have a lead, like, because they know
that's
that
great.
game.
And that's an extension of you. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, that's a legendary story right there. Like,
Oh, it was
I'm glad that you told this story, because that's
not many people know that, but I made it in school for about 15 minutes, and I was out in the parking lot and laying on the bathroom floor at my sister's house down the street. It was not good. Yeah.
But you know what? You slay the dragon being as sick as possible. And it's unbelievable, because like you said, the girls were locked in. I mean, I know anytime I've coached football and you go into a game playing a team that is, the papers might announce them being better. They beat some pretty good teams, and you go in at halftime and you're either beating them or you're in a very competitive game with them. Kids are locked in. They get it now. Now they understand everything you've preached and talked about. And, they've played one half of it, and they've seen it, and they're not impressed with what they see. And they're not afraid to go out there. So I thought it was cool that you seemed to just jump right out the gate in the second half and just never really look back. And like you said, I'm sure there were times you were just looking at the clock going,
oh, I just wanted that clock to keep ticking. Just please don't let the clock stop. Just keep going, keep going. I wanted to do anything in my power to at one point I was like, I don't care if we take a 30-second violation 3 times in a row. Like, let's just get that time. off the clock, you know, but the team did not disappoint, and we made some pretty tough stops and some pretty timely baskets that were just, everything that they had put in was an accumulation of, you know, their years of hard work. The ball went their way because they totally earned it and totally deserved it.
Yeah, and I feel your pain. I coach in the CCL, so I understand seeing Archie's and St.
Oh,
Mary's and
yeah.
Fenwick and Cardinal Spellman, like Austin Prep, like all those schools. Like, it's like, ugh. So I understand, you know, just the level of those schools and those sports, because I've seen it on the boys' side and a different sport. Just those are tough teams to play.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, Archie's, that wasn't the first time that we played them. We had been knocked out by them numerous times before, so everyone knew that, you know, it wasn't just this game. It was, okay, we're gonna try to get that payback.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I asked this next question to coaches, and you seem just to have some really tough luck too, not feeling good. And now what I'm jumping into now is, you know, COVID obviously affected everyone's seasons, every city, every town, you know, every league dealt with things differently, but it affected you a little bit more, like personally, you know, obviously coaching in the game and the way that you might have played or not been able to play or practice or so on, but it also affected you physically. So I just wanted to give you the floor a little bit and talk about, you know, how COVID really affected you and your basketball season.
Yeah, I obviously we were delayed. The whole state was delayed by 2 weeks. So I said, okay, everyone has to be delayed by 2 weeks. And then on December 9th, I wasn't feeling well. I tested positive for COVID. And I said, okay, I still have time and I was sick. I had all the symptoms. I wasn't up, or I couldn't physically do anything for at least 4 to 5 days. And then, you know, kind of, but then you're so out of it and you can't do anything anyways, because you're stuck in your house. You literally can't go anywhere, you know? So, and then, so we were back, Rockland got pushed back an extra 2 weeks. So we were scheduled to start our season finally on December 28th. Now we're usually 5 or 6 games deep at that point. And the day we went back, I had a really bad pain in my calf, and I was pushing it off. It was the first day, okay, here we go. And on that Wednesday, I took my shoe off and my foot blew up, and I drove myself to the emergency room, and I had 2 blood clots in my right leg. So I was in the emergency room just crying. You know, everything's going through my head. We had our first game in 2 days against Norwell, our biggest league rival. They're, you know, everyone wants to beat Rockland this year. Everyone always wants to beat Rockland in our league, and even more so us coming off of our run the year before. And I had to miss the next practice. I had missed my first game ever, and I had to sit at home and watch it on the couch. And then I didn't recover very quickly, and I couldn't be that energetic on the court coach that I was. And I felt like I was failing my team. You know, I couldn't, you know, I'm on the court with them. I'm, you know, doing energetic type things. And I didn't have that. And it took a toll on me mentally too. You know, I'm sitting there the whole time, you know, thinking about my own health and, you know, not as focused as I had been. And then I felt bad, and we lost that game. And it's like, then we lost, you know, in 2 games later. And, but then, you know, I started just to feel better, and we started to put things through, and we had a really young team. So, the year, it wasn't, you know, something that I felt I was obviously 100% at, but, I think that the team, you know, really got together and said, okay, we know what we need to do. You know, whether coach can do this 100% or not, like, we know it. And they got together, and, you know, our defense, and that's, you know, where everything that we ever do comes from. And our defense finally got to be close to where we wanted it by the end of the season. And again, that my coaching staff was always there for me. You know, if I wasn't there, I had 1, 2 assistant coaches. You know, unfortunately, we couldn't bring in, you know, usually I have players come back, but with COVID and everything, we couldn't bring in any of that extra help. But I have a great coaching staff, and the girls are just, you know, if I wasn't there, we would be texting. We would be saying, okay, this is what our practice plan is going in, like, let's do this. So, you know, if I wasn't there physically, we were still always in connection.
Yeah, and I just it's you hear obviously how scenes are affected and games are affected, but to hear you personally and how it affected you, obviously, and I like to say real life because sometimes in
Yeah.
coaching it's like you don't remember real
Yeah.
life, you
I'm
just
like, this
into
couldn't have
coaching.
happened at any other time.
Right.
Any other time. It has to happen the day that basketball season starts. So it took a big blow to me, and you know, it takes them, mentally to get back there just as long as it does physically.
Yeah, and I think the mental toll is what took effect on everybody. Just like you were
Mhm.
mentioning, being trapped in the house, not being able to really go out and do anything, it takes a toll on you. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So, and how are you doing now? How are you feeling
I'm
now?
great.
You
I'm
good?
great. Yep,
Awesome.
I got cleared by everything, so I'm back to, my normal selves. Now I want to go back into the season and have the whole season again. I got all my basketball energy back. I'm ready to go. I can't wait for summer league to start in 2 weeks and just be able to go full throttle again.
Well, good for you. I'm glad that you're healthy. That's the most
Thank
important thing
you.
at the end of the
Thank
day.
you.
So I'm going to read this next part. Now, when you won, D3 Coach of the Year in 2020, right? Um, I'm going to read a couple of quotes, and one I thought was cool because I wanted to connect here. But mentioned that Kristen McDonald, a guest who was on here a couple weeks ago, actually texted you and told you, that you had won the award. But then I read your quotes. It's attached to my name, but I like the award that gets attached to our program because it's more than just me. It's my assistant coaches and our athletic director and our players. That really stood out to me. Talk a little bit more about that because you have been a part of that program for a very long time as a player and coach. And now to win Coach of the Year for that high school, I mean, talk about what that award meant to you, a big picture.
Yeah, it was when she texted me and told me, I immediately had a smile on my face. It means a lot to me that the program was recognized because I know that everything that those girls do day in and day out, and it's not from the Monday after Thanksgiving into the last game. These Rockland girls, they are working all the time. And my coaching staff, my athletic director, who's our one of our biggest supporters, the administration at the high school, at the middle school. You'll never walk into a Rockland game and not see the middle school principal, the high school principal, the former principal, the former
That's cool.
superintendent walking there, watching the game, and every game we have alumni come back. And my old coach, who was the coach there for 30 years, is now my assistant. Like, it's a community, it's a family. So for Rockland to be able to get that recognition, I wish that it could say team of the year because that's what they were. I just happened to be, the head coach of that team, and I just think it's so deserving of all the little things that go into getting to play a season. And I think that we just have the best group around, and I couldn't trade any part of Rockland in for. I could never go anywhere else. You know, anything like that. So yes, it had my name on it, but it's a complete Rockland Community Award.
Yeah, and I have to be truthful. When I first started doing my research and asked you a few months back to come on the show, it was honestly that quote that made me reach out to you,
Uh-huh.
because I felt like that is like symbolic and needs to be heard. And I think a lot of coaches feel that way. But just the way that you put it and the way that you said it and just the way that you kind of said it now, I'm really glad I reached out to you because I think that's really cool for the school to hear, for the girls to hear, for everybody that's involved in your program, that it is a family community. And that's part of your 17 win year culture that you've built there. So I think that's
Right. And
really
it says the year 2020 on it, but it's an accumulation of every kid that I've ever coached. They might not have been on the team when I got this award, but they have made me into the coach that I am. So it's like, I hope that they know that and they're not just saying, oh yeah, I was a part at some point. Like, I hope they know that they have made me into the coach that I am today. Without them and everything, then it's nothing.
Yeah, no, it's great. It was well put by you, and you can tell you mean it. So that's what the
Yeah.
most important thing is. I asked this last question to everybody this month. I'll continue to ask the same question: is what's your advice to young, women coaches out there, or young women that are looking to jump into the coaching game and coach a sport that they played or they loved, or maybe even in your case, going back to where they played the coach? I mean, what would be your advice to young coaches when they first get their feet wet in any sport that they coach?
You got to be able to take the good with the bad, first of all. And it's actually kind of funny you say that, because I just got a message the other day from someone, a woman that's she said she thinks she wants to look into being a high school coach. She wanted to know if I could actually give all the advice that you just asked me right there, and if I could like go over practice plans and how she should interview and like what she should say and all that stuff. And it's kind of like, it's not the same for everyone. You know, my advice is to be honest, be true, be able to take negativity and be able to take positivity. You know, you're going to have good wins, you're going to have bad wins. You're going to have ugly losses, and you're going to have good losses. You're going to have issues with players. You're going to have issues with parents. It's inevitable, you know, in this time where everyone thinks that they have a voice and they can say whatever they want. But just have trust in yourself. Know that you are doing the best that you can to put the best product out there for the town that you're coaching or the school that you're coaching at. Know that you're doing it for the right reasons and you're doing it the right way. You know, and I say to our kids all the time, I don't care how someone else is doing it. This is the right way. We're going to stick to it. And I'm telling you, it's going to pay off. Like, trust me. And then we can develop that relationship. And I say to my players all the time, do you trust me? I trust you. Do you respect? You know, we have those conversations. And I just think that that's you be able to, you might not see that result that year, but you will see the result. You know,
Yeah.
it's hard. It's hard. It's not easy. There's never a day where you're like, wow, that was easy today.
Yeah.
You know, it's always
Never.
the opposite. You come home and you're exhausted physically, you're exhausted mentally, you're away from your family for hours, you're out scouting, you're putting things together. You have to have that knowledge that if you want to have success, you put in the time, and there are sacrifices that you make, and you have to understand that your players are putting that in that same sacrifice. So, you know, it's something that you just have to work together for. And, you know, you get the wins and losses, but if you come out knowing that you helped someone, you know, I would rather have a losing record every year and see my kids be successful and come back and say, you know, thank you for teaching me this, than having a winning season and never seeing my players after they graduate.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think alumni is everything. And obviously you're sending that message as a coach in your program for the 4 years that they're there. And you obviously mean it for the years that they're not there, to come back and be still a part of it and talk to the team. And, you know, just, you know, who knows, being assistant coach. I mean, there's, you know, you did the
Yeah.
same thing, you know, so.
Anyone that want to come back and be my assistant, absolutely.
Hey, it's out there, guys. If you're
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
So before we end our show, we like to do our last segment called the 2-minute drill. And basically what it is, just a bunch of fun questions about your sport, pertaining to your sport. We look for 1 or 2 word answers. It ends up always turning into a little bit more, which is totally fine. We're super lenient here. And that's it. My coaches say this is like the funnest segment of the show. They have a lot of laughs, and we'll have fun with this. Okay.
All right.
All right. So here we go. Let me set my timer, and here we go. Song that gets you juiced up still before a game.
Anything by Rihanna.
Okay. I like that answer.
Yeah.
All right. Most important position in your offense?
Point guard.
I've never had a coach say anything else. I got to stop asking that question. Offense or defensive minded coach?
Defense.
Okay. I love that. Player or coach that you looked up to most, either when you played or a coach that you look up to that you kind of aspire after?
This might be more than 2 words, because I've had some of the most amazing coaches. From my high school coach, Mal Lamb Cotton, you know, have in the Hall of Fame. My AU coach at Duxbury, Bob Sullivan. My college coach, Ian McInerney. I've been blessed. So anyone that has ever had an influence that I've learned under means the world to me.
Great answer. Love it. Did you cry after the Archie's game? Maybe threw up, but then did you cry after that?
Yeah. I cried because I was so excited to take the bus back with them. But yes, I did.
Yeah. Most rocking opponent's gymnasium that you've ever played in?
That's a good one. Opponent's gym. I wish we had more because I wish more people would come out to the girls' games because they can be pretty great.
And it could be a state tournament game. Maybe it's a state tournament game as well that you played in a gym that was just rocking.
Yeah. Geez. We've been hosting, usually the first 2 rounds, so that has been pretty good. I got to say that an opponent's gym, man, I don't like going into opponent's gym. I kind of try to block everything out. So I really, most teams represent, but I think that I only notice the Rockland people that are always there.
Okay, fair enough. I love the answer. All right.
Mhm.
Last question. Toughest non-league opponent you've ever played?
Arlington Catholic.
Yeah, they were pretty loaded some of the years that I coached there. They
Yeah.
were loaded.
Yeah, their point guard's at Stonehill this year, I believe.
Yeah.
But they didn't have that season. But yeah, they were that was tough.
Okay. All right. You survived the 2-minute drill, coach. You're good. And before we wrap things up here, I just want to say thanks for coming on here. Like I said to you, when I found that quote and saw that you won that award and that's what you had to say about it, I was really interested in getting you on here. And you were super excited when I reached out to you. So I really appreciate you taking the time and coming on here and really talking not only to me, but to all the listeners out there, just to hear an incredible coach who's been very consistent in their career. And I'm glad that you were really able to get your story out there today.
Yeah, and I love that you're doing this. Anytime I'm listening to a podcast lately, I'm listening to yours, going back and listen to them, and I hope you get stuff from other coaches, and I really appreciate what you're doing and the time that you take out to do all the research for everyone. So thank you for
Thank you.
having me. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I know on Friday I was leaving work and I had a woman that worked with me. She took a picture of her car because she had her Spotify on it. And my episode was the first thing to pop up on her
Oh,
thing.
that's
I thought it
awesome.
was pretty cool,
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, so it is a lot of fun to do, but I'm learning a lot. I really am. And, I'm hoping this is like professional development for a lot of people that are coaches out there or aspiring to be coaches to listen to some of the best to do it and to hear how they run their programs and the success that some of them have had over time. So thank you. And from Beyond Exodomes podcast, I'm your host, Anthony Petralis. Till next time.